So we're going to get started, and you have we are so thrilled to have Jessica Palmer here with us, who as of May 26th, is that correct?
Correct.
May 26th, we shall be officially called Dr. Jessica Palmer.
Woohoo!
So everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It is really an honor, really. That's the word that I want to use to host you here. You have such a long history with us, particularly when I say us, science research. Over the years, not only have you been, you were an amazing student with us, you also have been involved in judging for us, staying in contact. You've done so much for the program. So we're thrilled, including even assisting us in getting a mentor at Weill Cornell. Was it Weill Cornell? Was that right?
Yep.
So, it truly is thrilling. So I'm not going to say much more, except that I'm going to sit back and enjoy the presentation. I will be monitoring, as Jessica put it, the chat. And so that as questions pop into the audience's heads, you guys can just drop it in there, and we can read those questions when we get to the Q&A. Okay?
All right.
Without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the wonderful, the amazing Jessica Palmer.
Wow, what a lovely introduction. I promise he's not that nice when he's just speaking to me, but no, I'm just kidding. But thank you for the kind words. Again, I am Jessica Palmer. Thank you for bearing with my technical difficulties. Class of 2008, 13 years ago. It doesn't feel like that long, but it sounds like a long time. And I've noticed that this O Pride is now the new logo. It's in everyone's emails. And I just want to say that I do have a lot of pride in Ossining. It was a great place to grow up. And I feel like, you know, it's not the stereotypical Westchester town. When I went off to college, people hadn't heard of Ossining, but they had heard of Westchester and had certain, I think, stereotypes associated with Westchester County. And I think Ossining breaks all of them. It is just a really great, diverse place with amazing educators and amazing people. And I'm really happy to have gone to high school there. And I hope that all of you students will feel the same way one day. So to tell you about myself and what I've done in the 13 years since I graduated high school, I went to college at Cornell University. I graduated in 2012. I double majored in something called biology and society, which is kind of like a public health major. It was like biology, but more humanities classes, like learning about the sociology of medicine and things like that, which I kind of pursued thanks to the science research program. I was interested in science, interested in research, but didn't quite want to take it all the way to a full science major like biology or chemistry or something, because actually those hard science classes kind of scared me in college and I avoided them. And I also majored in English because I'm kind of a nerd. I like to read. I was taking a lot of my electives in English anyway, just to kind of read books for fun, did a lot of creative writing, that kind of thing. So when I graduated college, I was applying to a bunch of different jobs, but kind of hoping to end up doing research because that was my interest all the way back from high school. So I became a research coordinator in the program for anxiety and traumatic stress studies at Weill Cornell Medicine. So there I helped clinicians or psychologists with PTSD research or post-traumatic stress disorder. And then I actually, that's when I decided that I wanted to go to medical school. That was not something that I knew in college or knew my entire life. Actually, a lot of people in my medical school class, they've known since they were kids that they wanted to be a doctor, and that was just not me. But when I worked in this research position at Weill Cornell Hospital, I realized that it was the doctors who had the kind of job that I was interested in. You know, they were kind of taking the leadership positions, they were developing relationships with patients, and they were kind of just doing the things that I wanted to do. And it's funny because I avoided the pre-medical classes in college, kind of those hard science classes like biology, chemistry, physics. I took one semester of biology in college because it was required for my major, and I absolutely hated it. I didn't do that well in it. So I didn't think that I wanted to be pre-med or go to med school because I didn't want to take those classes. But then I realized that actually a doctor was what I wanted to be based on what they got to do with their careers. So I actually had to go back to school and do something called a post-baccalaureate pre-medical certificate program, which sounds a lot more complicated than it is. That's basically just, taking the pre-med classes and getting a certificate that says you're able to apply to medical school. So I did that at Georgetown University, and I finished in 2015. And then I didn't go straight to medical school. I needed to take some time to kind of apply and study for the MCAT, which is kind of like the SAT for med school. So I applied to another job, and I became a program specialist, which is kind of just a cancer research specialist, again at Weill Cornell, where I used to work, but this time in a different department. So I took that time to apply to medical school. And then in 2017, I started med school at New York Medical College. I'm graduating in a little less than a month. So like Pick said, soon I'll be Dr. Palmer, which is pretty exciting because I've been working towards this for a long time. And actually New York Medical College is right in Valhalla. It's about a 15-minute drive from Ossining, which has been nice because I've been able to see my family a lot in med school. I kind of partially would stay at home in Ossining when I needed to be on campus, but most of all of this time, except for when I went to Georgetown and lived in DC, I've lived in New York City. So I was in Brooklyn for a lot of years, and now I live in Manhattan on the Upper East Side. And now looking forward, I'm starting something called residency, which is kind of when you're a doctor in training after med school. And I'm doing that again at Weill Cornell. If you're sensing a Cornell theme, I swear it wasn't on purpose, but it's just kind of played out that way. So I'm starting, my first big girl job in June, where I actually get to be a doctor taking care of patients, which is really exciting for me. So I feel like everyone gets asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I think if you had asked me that, any time in my life, basically, I would have made that kind of annoyed and confused face that I'm making in this baby picture of myself. Because I think for me, when I was younger, like I said, I didn't always know I wanted to be a doctor. When I was younger, it constantly changed. My mom moved out of Ossining about a year ago, and I was going through old things that she wanted to either keep or get rid of when she moved. And I found this thing, that basically said that I answered when I was like 8 years old. What do you want to be when you grow up? And I wrote either a children's dentist or a circus performer. So you can see that there was kind of a wide span of things that I might want to be. And I think it just changed constantly when I was younger. I mean, it was a writer at some point. I mean, circus performer, that's ridiculous. Like, I'm not even flexible. So I think it's kind of a silly question. I think it's good to kind of gear yourself towards your career, towards your interests. But I think what I'm trying to say is that it doesn't really matter if you don't know right now. That's kind of the advice that I want to give to high school students, because I didn't know. I didn't know in high school. I loved the science research program. I think that was really instrumental in me being interested in public health and research and medicine, and kind of geared me towards what I'm doing right now. But I couldn't have told you. I think I would have laughed if you had told me that I would be a doctor in high school. And I didn't really know in college. Like I said, I avoided those pre-med science classes that you need to take to go to medical school because I thought they were too hard, honestly. So if I would have laughed again if you had told me in college that I would end up being a doctor. And then, like I said, I figured it out kind of over a year after graduating, once I was working that research job in a hospital. And to be honest, I still don't fully know, because even now that I've decided to be a doctor, there's so many different types of doctors you can be, and I'm not fully set on the kind that I want to be yet. So honestly, just let yourself kind of figure it out as you go. If you have an idea now, that's great, but kind of just follow your interests and see where it takes you. So speaking of the research program, I just wanted to take a little trip down memory lane. So here are some pictures of me with Pick and Holmes. We had some really great times at different science research competitions. These are all from ISEF in Albuquerque. And I really kind of use this slide to make fun of Pick, because, you can see there might be a difference between then and now, and it's what he looks like. And I'll never pass up on an opportunity to make fun of him. No, he looks totally normal in these pictures, but it's just an easy target, sorry. Okay, so going back to high school, I was looking at this picture from a pep rally, and honestly, it kind of gives me some anxiety considering COVID right now, because obviously this kind of thing is not possible. And I do feel bad for, people in high school during COVID right now. It was hard to be in med school. I'm sure it's even harder to be in high school. So just want to acknowledge that, it's probably a difficult time right now, but we did get to do fun things like this back in the day. I've got a picture with Mr. North. I don't know if some of you might have him for any sort of social studies class. And I'm still friends with these two girls in the picture today. They're both teachers, actually, which is really cool. I think Japhis might have been a bit of an inspiration there. And then here's a picture of me graduating with Mr. Mandel. So this is me now. So this is from my white coat ceremony, which is kind of the beginning of med school, to kind of mark that you're starting your journey to become a doctor. This is from something called Match Day, which is where you get to find out where you go to residency, which again is kind of the doctor in training step after med school. This is me and my fiance. We're getting married in September 2022, which is exciting. And then here is a picture of me with my graduation gear and my dog Taco, which is part of the fun part of growing up and becoming more responsible, is that you can maybe get your own pet. And Taco's great. He's back here somewhere. And the funny thing about this picture is, since it's COVID, we're not having a real graduation, which is kind of unfortunate. And I'm sure if there are any seniors there, you can maybe relate. I'm not sure what's going on with graduation. But basically, my school told all of us that we had to take pictures on our own in our full graduation gear and submit for a slideshow, because we're not actually, you know, walking across the stage to get our diplomas. So I obviously had to include my dog in my picture. So they told us that they wanted this to be kind of career oriented. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about medical school, because I would say, I guess technically that's what my career is right now. I'm not a doctor yet. I can't really talk about what it means to be an actual doctor. But if any of you are thinking about medicine, here's just a little bit of an overview. So you take 4 years of school, which is after taking the prerequisites in college that I talked about. So the science classes like biology, chemistry, and physics. So usually you take those in a 4-year college program. But like I said, I was not ready to take them in college, and I actually had to do a program specific to those classes after college. And then you have to take the medical school admission test, which is called the MCAT, again, kind of like the SATs, but it focuses on more science-driven topics. And then the different types of doctors that you can be. You can do internal medicine, which is actually what I'm doing. But like I said, still not really sure what I want to do, since that's actually the most broad type of medicine. It basically means general medicine. So you can kind of go into a million different things from that, which is why I'm still deciding. You can do primary care, which is basically like the doctor that your parents see, just getting your yearly checkup, kind of coordinating to make sure everything is going well health-wise. You can do cardiology, which is being a heart doctor, gastroenterology, which is the whole, you know, stomach and digestive system, oncology, which is cancer, which I actually might be interested in, but I'm not positive yet. Infectious disease, which they've been really busy with COVID recently, and geriatrics, which is specifically elderly people. And honestly, those are just a few choices. And that's just under internal medicine. So you can also do neurology, which is studying the brain. You can do obstetrics and gynecology, which is women's health and delivering babies and things like that. Seeing babies being born is pretty miraculous. It's really cool. I enjoyed that rotation a lot when I got to, because you get to go through all of these specialties and then you decide which one you want to do. Pediatrics, which is, you know, taking care of children. I'm sure you all have or had pediatricians. Psychiatry, which is mental health. Surgery, and then there are a bunch of different types of surgery. You can specifically do orthopedic surgery, which is kind of like joints and bones and sports medicine. You can do cardiothoracic surgery, which is just, you know, heart surgery, basically, and things in the chest area. And then there's emergency medicine, which is, you know, when someone comes to the ER with an emergency, you're taking care of them. So I just kind of wanted to go through those options a little bit. If anyone has questions about anything, I'm happy to take them at the end. So I was trying to think about, you know, what words of wisdom I can impart to students. And I think one of the most important things for me in life has been balance. So it might seem like, you know, I'm this hard worker going to medical school, you know, study all the time. And yeah, you need to work hard to get to that point. But I think what helped me the whole time was not just focusing on those things, not only studying all the time, not only working all the time, because I think that's a really easy way to burn out, and you need to really cut yourself some slack a lot of the time and prioritize yourself. So I don't think I could have gotten through this kind of long journey for my leading towards my career that I've gotten to without, prioritizing spending time with friends, family, my fiance, my dog, and doing the things I enjoy. So whether that for you is playing a sport or reading or spending time with friends, I think it's really important that you still do those things and not, have tunnel vision into what you're doing, because, you need to still enjoy yourself and make sure that you're prioritizing your own mental health and your happiness, as well as looking forward to your career in the future. And then I just wanted to give a shout out to Mr. Jaffis. Unfortunately, we don't have any pictures together from high school, which is a tragedy. I don't know how that happened. But I did listen to his advice, and I opened a Roth IRA right after graduating in August 2008, kind of cobbled together some money from graduation gifts. I worked a job at a catering company in Briarcliff throughout high school. So I put a little bit of money in there just to start. And honestly, I haven't added to it that much because I've been a perpetual student. Being a student is really expensive. Something I should have said about medical school earlier, it's really expensive. You have to take out a lot of loans to do it. So I haven't felt like I've really had the money to put that much in without going into specifics. But I can say I haven't added that much, but I've still gotten a high rate of return, 9.42%. And the amount of money in the account that I've put in, the amount of money in the account now that's grown is much greater than the amount of money that I originally put in, even with not being able to contribute that much. So I think it's a really great idea for anyone who's able to, or even, once you start your first job out of college, it's something you should start to do early. And I'm sure Mr. Jaffis is really happy that I'm saying this right now, but I do think it's super important. I even got my fiance to open an IRA because I think it's a really great way to save for the future. And I think if Jaffis were an emoji, he would be this one with the money for eyes. All right, so that's everything I have. If you have any questions, please let me know. If you have questions about any of these things, I think I'm pretty knowledgeable on these topics by now. Cornell for undergrad, living in New York City, working in research, and applying to med school. But honestly, any general questions I'm happy to take as well. And my email address is here if you want to get in contact with me later.
Okay, fantastic. Everybody should clap right now. And I will start reading some of the questions on the chat. So we'll start with that. That was amazing. I'm a little disappointed that you gave a shout out to Mr. Jaffis, and probably for like the $5 that you put into that account, considering that through science research, you won $50,000. So everybody should clap for that too.
Yeah. You got 3 pictures, so you got the shout out first. Don't be.
I'm just kidding. We're having a good time. So Mr. Jaffis actually has a very good question. I was looking at it. He said that he asked, you went through many expensive schools. How did you handle, or are you in debt? How did you?
I did allude to this a bit when I was talking about the IRA, but yes, I have a lot of debt, unfortunately. So it's basically just from medical school. The scholarship that Pick just mentioned actually covered a lot of college for me. So I was able to graduate college debt-free, which I don't think is normal, honestly, but I was very lucky to be in a position where I did graduate college debt-free. And then I did have to incur some debt to do my pre-med program at Georgetown. But since it was a short program, when I was working after that, I was actually able to kind of pay it off. And then unfortunately, med school is really expensive, but it's kind of with the idea that you will be a high earner as a doctor. So I do have a lot of debt from med school, to be completely honest, and it is a little stressful to know that I have that much, but it's also knowing that I will probably be making a lot of money, not immediately in my first job next year as that kind of doctor in training that I was talking about. You unfortunately don't make that much because you're still in training, but I would say, like 6 years down the road, hopefully I will have an income that allows me to pay off the high debt that I have. So yeah, don't undertake it lightly, because it is a long and expensive path, but it also, I think, is definitely what I want to do. So for me, it was worth it to take on that debt to advance my career.
That's awesome. So everybody, all you guys now should write her name down, because when you start having your own families, who you're taking over to check on your internal medicine to help you pay for that debt. One of our students here in science research has a question. She says, some of it you already answered, but one of the main themes of it is, did you ever worry that you're going to work, have a job that was not really something that you wanted to do?
Yeah, totally. And I'm seeing this is a really good question from Genevieve in the chat. So yeah, in college, like I said, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. I did a kind of public health major and really did want to gear my career towards public health and research. But I also had that English major, which, like I said, was for fun. So I kind of just really needed to get a job, graduating from college. So I did apply mostly to research jobs, but I did apply to some that were kind of more in the realm of what an English major would apply to. So for example, some things in like advertising where you're like designing, the what's written in ads and stuff like that. And for me, I mean, I think that can be cool, like in a certain creative way, but that wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. But I was able to kind of market myself to those types of jobs, having been an English major, concentrating in creative writing. But that isn't necessarily what I wanted to do. And, thankfully, those jobs didn't actually pan out, and the research job is what panned out. But totally, I think every step of the way, I didn't necessarily know what was going to come next. And I think you kind of need to, stay broad for a while, but then realize ultimately what you want to do and narrow it down as you progress.
Well, that's awesome. Genevieve also had another question. What was your science research project in high school?
That is a great question. So I studied autism. I think the title of my project was examining repetitive behaviors in parents and siblings of individuals with autism. So basically, I looked at specifically something called repetitive behaviors, which is a hallmark of autistic traits, and looked at if parents and children exhibited any of these autistic-like traits without being diagnosed with autism themselves. And what I found is that parents did not exhibit any of these repetitive behaviors, but siblings had an increased behavior called preference for routine, which is kind of self-explanatory, just liking routine a little more than your average person. And also, I did want to. How do I do, Pick? Am I still in my presenting research mode?
You're doing great.
I mean, I had to say that kind of elevator pitch of my research project so many times in high school that I think it's forever stuck in my head. But I did want to give a shout out to Pick and Holmes earlier, actually, while I was presenting, because they are really the ones who taught me how to make a good PowerPoint. So I actually am that person in group projects who's like, I'll do the PowerPoint. I don't know if making a PowerPoint for this presentation was overkill or whatever, but they taught me well. So
that was awesome. But one thing that I do want to say that it looks like from the chat that Mr. Yonkler sense of humor has not evolved at all since I taught him in high school. So let's go on to the next one. So this is great. I had a question actually.
Go for it.
Did COVID impact the way your med school courses or your instruction that you received while you were in med school the last year and a half or so?
Yeah, it really did. I mean, first of all, it was just kind of scary to be in medicine during COVID. I was not on the front lines. I was not treating COVID patients. Actually, we aren't allowed to see COVID patients as med students. I think that's changing now that most of us are vaccinated, but we weren't allowed to see COVID patients. So I wasn't necessarily, like a frontline healthcare worker, but it was still kind of scary knowing that I was going into this field that is the one dealing with this pandemic. So just that in itself was a challenge, kind of grappling with that knowledge and knowing, something like this comes up again, it will kind of be up to me to a certain extent to deal with it. But then, there's a rewarding aspect of that too. And then how it actually affected my education. So in medical school, I didn't go into this before, but it's 4 years, like I said. The first 2 years, you're kind of doing lectures, learning material. You're not actually in the hospital seeing patients yet. You're kind of learning all the things that you need to learn to be prepared to go into the hospital and see patients. And then in the second 2 years, the third and fourth year, you are in the hospital seeing patients. You're doing these different rotations that I mentioned before. I listed all the different specialties. You rotate through the different specialties. So when COVID hit, I was at the end of my third year, which is the first year that you rotate in the hospital. And I was in the middle of my neurology rotation. And at first, you know, when there started being cases in New York and things, it was a little weird being in a hospital. You know, they were starting to worry, is this patient coming in, someone with COVID? You know, the testing wasn't big yet. So for a little while, it was a little weird to be there. And then once cases really started increasing, my school, and I think most med schools across the country, actually pulled students from the hospitals, so we couldn't do our rotations anymore. And, you know, that was great for our safety, but really unfortunate because we switched to virtual learning like a lot of you did. And as I'm sure you know, it's really not the same, especially from like this part of medical school where you're really supposed to be hands-on and interacting with patients. So basically, I didn't actually get to see patients for the rest of my neurology rotation. We did a couple virtual projects, and then my entire surgery rotation, which is one of the like biggest, most important rotations in med school, was online. And surgery is a really hands-on specialty. So I didn't actually get to learn how to do surgery. And I feel like I missed a really important part of my medical training. That's kind of a rite of passage because it's actually the most intense rotation. Thankfully, I don't want to go into surgery. If I had, I think that would have been a much bigger loss for me to experience it virtually. But yeah, it wasn't great, honestly, to have to do things that are so hands-on, you know, through a computer screen, and it didn't translate very well. So COVID definitely affected medical education. You know, I think it's affected everyone. But yeah, fortunately, when, you know, cases kind of went down over the summer and the fall, we were able to return to the hospitals. So I did get my entire fourth year last year as a normal year. But then what changed in the fourth year, that's when you're applying to residency, which is that doctor in training part that I was talking about that I'm starting in June. Usually when you're applying, you apply to a bunch of different jobs at a bunch of different hospitals and you go there in person for your interviews. But the interviews were virtual this year. So it's kind of hard for me to make a decision about where I wanted to go because I didn't get to go see the hospitals in person. And I think that might have had a little bit to do with me wanting to go back to Cornell because at least I'd worked there before and knew that it was a good hospital and knew that I liked it, whereas a lot of the other programs that I applied to, I hadn't been to before, and they were even in different cities. You know, I applied to some places on the West Coast, places in Boston and Philadelphia, and you know, I couldn't really picture myself being there because I didn't get to see them. So all those interviews that are normally in person were on Zoom, and that affected the interview experience. So yeah, COVID had a big impact on med school, just like everything else.
Wow. I have a question from Caitlin Waselenko, who's Miss Longatano's class. What was like living in the city and going to school? New York City, I would imagine talking about New York City.
Yeah, so I mean, I lived in the city even before med school. I really love New York City. I like the fast-paced energy. There's always something to do. I mean, you can definitely argue that it is, you know, a bit distracting if you're trying to be a student because there is so much going on. But I had lived there, you know, before I was a student when I was just working in a job. So I think, you know, I still had gotten to experience a lot of the fun things that the city had to offer. So by the time I became a student, I was able to kind of hunker down a little more. And like I said, since my school is actually in Westchester, I was at home in Ossining some of the time, which was nice that I had that option because it was kind of a calmer, quieter environment to be able to study and things like that. And I do think a lot of my classmates opted, at least for the first couple of years, to live on campus in Westchester, which I didn't do because, you know, I had my parents' place in Westchester and then I also had my fiance's place in the city, so I didn't have to live on campus. But I think, you know, that's probably a good option if you want to be, you know, right by school. But I didn't do the necessarily traditional thing because I had options to live either at home or in the city. But yeah, I love New York City. It's an awesome place. I remember, you know, taking every opportunity to go when I was in high school living in Ossining because I, you know, just found it really exciting to hang out there. So.
Jess, what does your fiance do?
So he does a few things. He is actually involved in like youth sports and education, I would say, is like the overview. But he coaches different sports throughout the school year. He works in the athletic department at a school. He helps run a young kids basketball program in New York City. And then in the summers, he is the assistant director of a summer camp for like a boys sports summer camp.
Mr. Jaffis, do you approve? I just want to make sure you're good with that.
I haven't met him yet, but before the wedding.
Well, actually, Jaffis knows someone who's affiliated with the camp who knows my fiance. And I'm pretty sure Jaffis's friend who knows my fiance has good things to say about him. So
good. All right. So we're on the same page then. We're good to go here.
Yeah, it's all good. I trust my friend's opinion.
Well, Mr. Jaffis, Kayla, I just wanted to, I was saying before, Mr. Jaffis jumped in, is that probably the reason why Caitlin was also curious about that question about the cities, because her lab that she's going to go to this summer, hopefully, will open up for her is at NYU Langone. So that's where her mentor is.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, NYU is a great institution, so I hope to get some good work done there.
We have one here, and this is not induced by us, not me or Ms. Holmes, but it says, do you have plans of possibly taking in future science research students as mentors?
Is that a plant?
No, it's not. It's not.
No, honestly,
Totally not.
I would love to, because
Hermione, this kid wrote it right there.
I mean, if you haven't gotten the gist, science research was so, fundamental to my high school experience, and honestly to my life experience and what I've decided to do and everything. So I would love to give back in the future if I can. So, but not yet, because I don't think I'm qualified. Once I have my own research, I'll let you know.
That's good. Sarah Jennings asked, was it difficult to find a job when you were out of college? And how did you go about finding your job opportunities?
Yeah, the short answer is yes. I think it's just a hard thing. Like I said, I was kind of applying to a bunch of different things, seeing what came back. And so I think, wherever you go to undergrad will have a career office that will help you. And that's kind of where I got started, was looking at, job postings through the career office. But those, again, it's like a huge pool, and you kind of have to figure out what you might be qualified for, where your skills might align with the, skills that they're looking for. And for me, it was a little stressful because I felt like a lot of my classmates at Cornell who had majors maybe more specifically geared towards careers like business or something, they kind of figured it out like early senior year of college and already had job offers lined up, whether that was from, an internship that they had done, or just, I think, it's kind of easier to get a job with certain majors, whereas I kind of had a more all over the place education purposefully. I wanted to take a bunch of different things that I was interested in. I wanted to double major, but I actually didn't have a job lined up when I graduated. And I had to keep applying, looking at career postings and through my school and things like that in the summer after I graduated college. But I ended up kind of starting around a similar time as my classmates at the end of August after I graduated college in May. But I did have to kind of still spend that summer afterwards, still applying, still looking for openings. And yeah, I don't know if that was a very helpful answer, but it kind of just is a grind. And it even was, once I finished my pre-med program and was applying to jobs again, even then I still had to apply to a bunch of different things. Some things you just don't hear back from. Some things you'll do, an interview or two, and then it doesn't go anywhere after that. And that's how it is a lot of the times. And you just kind of have to keep pushing, keep applying to things. At least that was my experience.
So it looks like we have time for one more question. We have 2 minutes left before the period ends. Did English creative writing impact you as a student, even though you chose to become a doctor? What are you interested in reading, writing?
So Roxanne, I love this question. I think it's a great question because I love reading and writing still, even though you wouldn't necessarily think that it applies too much to medicine. I think it applies to everything. I think those are skills, whether it's, critical reading skills or writing skills, can apply to anything that you do. And I actually think that in medicine, it's made me stand out a little more, when I was applying to residency and things like that. Just because it's not the typical path for someone becoming a doctor to undergo. And I think those are skills that are actually kind of difficult to develop if you're only focusing on, things like science and the more nitty gritty details of science classes. And I think it's helped me, write my personal statements for applications, write cover letters for jobs. And I hope to use it in my career one day, because as Pickett Holmes and everyone in the research program knows, you need to write your papers to, explain your research and talk about your scientific findings. And I think, it's a different type of skill than creative writing, but, writing is going to help you no matter what you do.
All right, so we want to thank you so much, everybody. Unmute and clap.
Thank you.
Don't be such a stranger. Good luck on the 26th.
Thank you.
You know,
Thank you, everyone.
and I look forward to a bunch of text messages from you.